Hello, I'm Mary. No, not Mary, the mother of Jesus, nor Mary Magdalene either. But there was another Mary who was with them at the foot of the cross. And that's me. Though you probably would have missed me in the story. I figure in another story too, but you'll know that story better by the name of my husband, who was Cleopas. We had been in Jerusalem for that eventful week. As my story opens, we had been in lockdown for 3 days, shut up in a little room with just a couple of friends who were friends of Jesus, as we are. We were there because we were very afraid. We'd seen what happened to Jesus, and we didn't know when they might come for us. In that room, there was palpable fear. There was great desolation, sorrow and grief. The grief compounded by the fact that we'd heard rumours that some other women had been to the tomb early this morning and they'd found the tomb empty. Were we to be denied a body to mourn after what we'd witnessed on that terrible Friday? Some people were in tears in that room. Others were very withdrawn. Some people were angry with Judas. And although they didn't say it, I think some people were angry with Jesus himself. After all that he'd told us, after all that we'd seen of him, how could it have come to this? The one who raised Lazarus from the death. How come he let himself be crucified? We could make absolutely no sense of it, and we felt utterly abandoned. Cleopas and I began to feel that we needed to escape that room. We couldn't stay there any longer. And although we were afraid of what might happen when we went outside the door, we crept out stealthily and tried to go as unobtrusively as possible through the city and on the road to Emmaus, to home. Though what would await us there, we had no idea. And no hope, really, that we would cope with it any better. In fact, we were hopeless. Well, as we set out on our journey, the sun was beginning to go down. We shaded our eyes. And anyway, we were looking down at our feet most of the way. Unlike just a week ago, when we travelled full of hope and excitement even, because we'd heard that this Passover, Jesus was going to make a great entrance into Jerusalem. And we wanted to be there and be part of this new movement. We found out where they were and we joined the other followers, shouting and clapping and shouting Hosanna to the Son of David. We really thought, we'd really hoped that would be the beginning of the ushering in of this new and bright kingdom that Jesus had promised. How different it is now. All those hopes dashed. No idea where we go from here. How can we go back to our old lives without Jesus, who had become the centre of our lives and our hope, not only for Israel, but for the whole world? Well, as we walked along, engaging in some conversation, but very stiltingly, as we just didn't know what to say to one another, how to express that grief and sorrow. A stranger called us up and walked alongside us. I barely glanced at him. I was too preoccupied, too overwhelmed. Anyway, he said to us, "You seemed in deep conversation there. Has something happened?" Well, Cleopas lost it a bit then and answered very sarcastically, "Are you the only person who's been in Jerusalem these last few days and has no idea what's going on? Where have you been?" Thankfully, the stranger wasn't put off by that. And I saw that he had a kind, understanding face. And so I began to tell him what had happened, ignoring sharp looks from Cleopas, who I knew was really worried that this might be a spy, either from the Jewish authorities or from the Roman authorities. But once I started, I couldn't stop. I just poured out all the anguish, all that sense of lost hope, not just for myself, but for the people around me, this country, and the world. Well, the stranger just listened attentively. And he'd waited until I got all that off my chest. And Cleopas had added his bit as well. Before he said to us with a smile on his face, "You foolish people, you just missed the point altogether." I'm a bit taken aback by that, especially by a stranger. But then he went on to say, and to explain to us how the scriptures pointed to this, of what had happened to Jesus. It was amazing. We were soon totally captivated because he began right in the story of the Garden of Eden, of how at that, if you like, first meal when Eve offers Adam the fruit and they eat of it and the relationship with God is spoiled. And he took us from there all through the scriptures, showing that ever since that moment, God had been, through his servants, had been trying to call Israel back to himself, offering a firm hope. He wasn't just giving us proof texts. Lots of preachers try that. I'm never very convinced. No, this was a deep and a profound understanding of the scriptures. And as he unfolded God's plan for us, it began to make more and more sense. And I began to understand that God hadn't promised to redeem us from suffering, which is what we'd always thought really. He'd promised through his servant to redeem us, to set us free from evil and from death through suffering, the suffering of his chosen one. Well, by this time it was nearly dark. We'd reached Emmaus, and the stranger said his goodbyes as if he was going to go on with his journey. But neither Cleopas nor I at that point could let him go. We wanted to hear more. Already there was a flicker, a tiny flicker of hope again. And anyway, it would have been really rude to have sent him on his way and not invited him in for something to eat and to drink. So we both begged him to come in and have a meal with us. Because we'd been away, I knew it'd only be very simple, but we got bread and cheese and olives and wine. So he came in and we had a meal together. And as he was giving us more reasons to hope again, he suddenly took the bread as if he were the host at this meal, not ourselves. He took the bread and began to break it. And as he did that, we suddenly realised where we'd seen this so many times before. Cleopas and I looked at each other. Can it be? Is it? Yes, it really is Jesus. Here, with us, alive. Just as we made that realisation, Jesus disappeared from our sight. But we didn't feel bereft all over again, because by now we'd begun to understand what all this was about. We'd begun to remember the many times Jesus had tried to tell us that he would lay down his life for us and, after 3 days, rise again. Well, we were so overjoyed. We couldn't just sit there, we couldn't go to bed. We quickly got our cloaks on, almost ran out the door, and walked as fast as we could back to Jerusalem. This was news that had to be shared, and we needed to share it with Jesus' friends. So, unlike the journey to Emmaus earlier that evening, we didn't drag our feet, eyes cast downwards. No, we charged ahead as quickly as we possibly could and burst through the doors of where our friends were still waiting. And to our surprise, when we got there, they'd already got some news. Before we could tell them our news, they said, "Guess what's happened since you've been away? Really good news. Simon Peter has seen the Lord." And of course, we had to tell them that we too had seen the Lord. Well, we were so excited. We had to hear each stories over and again, the stories of the women who went to the tomb early on, Simon Peter's story, our story. And as word began to get round, more people came into the room. And some of the 12 came too. Everyone bursting with excitement. We couldn't take it all in. But we were beginning to see a pattern in all this that we hadn't seen before. And I began to think to myself about that story that was told of Jesus when he was just a lad and got lost in the temple, or his parents thought he got lost, and how Joseph and Mary searched and searched for him and asked everyone they met, had they seen him? And when finally they caught up with him and found him in the temple with the rabbis, Jesus' answer to their urgent and anxious inquiries was, well, I was about my Father's work. And I don't know whether I've got this right or not, but it seems to me that in these 3 days that we've had since the crucifixion, when we've been searching and desperate and losing all hope, Jesus too was about his Father's work in the most wonderful way. And we began to just glimpse, that through Jesus' work on the cross, in the tomb, and his rising up, the work of redemption has been accomplished. Evil and death are destroyed. The new kingdom that Jesus spoke of God's reign here on earth as in heaven, has truly begun. And I don't know about you, but I want to be a part of that. And I want to follow Jesus closely and learn more from him, from the risen Lord, day by day, just what that means.